backstage at San Diego Comic-Con. We're outside. This is Matt Harrigan with the Adult Swim Podcast. Chris Prynoski has been making cartoons since the late 90s. He just pulled up in his Titmouse RV to tell us everything he knows. So you come to Comic-Con and it's a clusterfuck zoo here.
Yeah. Anybody who's never been to Comic-Con, it's bananas. And there's so many people, and it's hot. But we've been doing for the past 5 years an RV where we stock it full of cold water, beer, booze, and ice cream. And we just drive around and we do all our press. This is the only thing I'm doing that isn't on the RV right now.
Yeah?
The only interview I've done that hasn't been on the RV.
You do everything on the RV.
Yeah, man. And most of the people are so stoked, you know, if you're writing for like a nerd blog or animation blog, which are mostly the people who want to talk to us. They're like, they don't have big fancy press rooms. They're like, whoa, this is great. Like, I don't have to like find a corner of the lobby of the Marriott to like try and find a half decent place to record
to plug in my shit.
Yeah, exactly.
At the Bayfront.
Yeah, and it's been cool. And then we stay at a campground.
You camp?
Yeah, and like the first 3 years I actually slept on the RV with like our crew.
You slept on the RV?
Yeah, and it's cool. The RV's air conditioned and the campground's cool. But now we rent these little cabins too, so we have a whole scene down at Titmouse folks at the campground, and we drive around, get drunk, go to the parties, do our Comic-Con shit.
Tell me about your relationship with Budweiser.
Oh man, well I started maybe over 10 years ago, like 10 or 15 years ago. Just I found one of those stupid like Budweiser like kind of fishing hats, like a bucket hat on eBay or something, and ordered it and started wearing it. And then I got a couple of them, and it became a thing. Like, you know, people have these stupid, you know, in this entertainment industry, it's good to be like recognized, or so you see something and we're like, oh, that's the guy with the bucket hat. And then I would get other ones like Marlboro ones or PBR ones. And then I found it's harder and harder to get them. And they sometimes are fucked up and they get more expensive. So I started making my own with like the Titmouse Budweiser version.
Yeah.
And now what's good, when they first were done, they were too new looking, but now I have a few of them. Now they're all fucked up. Just like they should. They're all beat up. And, you know, Tommy Blacha, who's, done a bunch of Adult Swim stuff and a bunch of stuff. You know, he's Murderface and he's co-creator of Metalocalypse. It's his girlfriend, Allison, is like she does like costumes for TV shows and stuff. And she hooked me up with the people. I'm like, you must know somebody who can make a bucket hat. She's like, yeah. She's like, give me the hat that is the exact one that you like, and they'll base a pattern exactly off that hat.
Wow.
And then you could get this fabric made online. It's $15 a yard. You just send them a pattern, and they'll make it for you. So nowadays with the internet and shit, you can make anything. It's crazy.
So, but you don't let other people who work there wear them?
No, not that I forbid them from wearing it. It hasn't really come up. Probably not. It might be weird.
It would be weird.
Yeah. So, and I like to drink beer, too.
I have one of those hats, the Budweiser one.
Yeah.
But without the brim, like it's just like
the top
I have
part. Some of those too. I did once one. So I ordered one. Yeah, and it was like a little tiny one,
like a beanie,
like that,
kinda,
right?
Yeah.
And I wore it under my one. And then at one point in a meeting, I took off my hat, like did a take, like a cartoon take, where I pulled off my hat and had another hat under there. People like, what the fuck? Do you wear that little hat under there all the time? It worked like a charm.
It's a backup hat in case that one blows off.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Interesting. So you really have a signature look.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I got like, you know, I'm a fucking white, bearded, fat dude with glasses.
Yeah,
that's like every animator, man.
Yeah,
I gotta have something that it's like makes me stand out. Actually, years ago, when Adult Swim basically just had a booth on the floor, they would swap out the signs for the shows each day, and they had this cool like Death Clock one that was like made out of metal and it was like bleeding and stuff. And we were like, "What are you doing with that?" And they're like, "Man, we're just gonna throw it out unless you want it. You can come, you can have it, but you got to figure out how to get it home." And we're like, "Yeah, we'll figure it out." So we had like a like a Honda CRV, and we like measured it. It was like, if we put it in at an angle, it'll fit. So we this is going back to being a fucking white fat guy with a beard and glasses, right?
Yeah.
And
Preaching in the choir.
so they're like, come back at the end of the day and take it, and it's yours, right? So we're going in. I'm walking with our, like, she was our like kind of office manager at the time. She was driving the truck. Kate, who's like a big, tall, like very, like noticeable, like had a crazy like dreadlocks and different colored hair and piercings and tattoos. So she's real noticeable, right? And we're walking to go into the con, and the floor is shut down. So the first door, the guy's like, you're not allowed in. And I'm like, I'm going to, they're giving me the sign, Adult Swim, and they're like, do you have an exhibitor badge? And I didn't. I just had a regular badge. They're like, you can't come in. I'm like, shit. So we go to the next one. I'm like, I gotta go. And they're like, you can't go in. You can't go in. So then we go to the third one, and the same thing. You can't go in. You can't go in. I just look over at Kate, and I just make a break for it and run past the guy. And she couldn't. She's like so recognizable. She couldn't get past him. But once I was in the sea, it's like, what do they do? The guy can't chase me and abandon his post. And then if he calls on the CB, he's like, I spotted a white man with beard and glasses with a cartoon character shirt on. It'd be like, fucking, there's a fucking 100,000 guys like
crime.
that in there. Yeah. And then we got the sign, and we drilled it to the wall of Titmouse. It's still there. And for years it dripped. It had this weird goo in it that was supposed to represent blood. I think for like 5 years it never stopped dripping. There'd be these weird puddles. Yeah, it was a bleeding sign.
Wow.
It was an actual bleeding sign.
So start from the beginning.
Yeah.
Where you're from Jersey, and you started. Did you draw when you were a kid?
Oh yeah, I drew pictures all the time.
Draw in your notebook in class and stuff?
Yeah, all the time.
What did you draw?
Do probably standard kid stuff. A lot of
KISS logos and stuff.
like yeah. I remember I have a picture from when I was real young. Probably I was like 5 years old. That was like, it was Kiss and Elvis on stage together. Thought that was a scenario that could happen.
Perfect
as a
band.
kid. Yeah, I think they were the two bands I'd heard of at the age of 6. But I drew probably a lot of monsters, a lot of superheroes. Standard demons, chopping each other's heads off or whatever. Little kids want to draw.
Yeah.
And would do those ones in the edge of your textbooks.
Flip book?
Yeah, little flip books of like little guys killing each other.
Parents encourage you?
Yeah, the parents didn't discourage me. They were pretty encouraging, and and I had a friend who was a couple years older than me that got a video camera when that wasn't as big of a thing. You had to be like rich. His dad, he was divorced, and his dad was older, so he would buy him all this shit that nobody else got.
Worked in your favor?
Yeah, exactly. So he had like a VCR in like 1981 or something, like before anybody else. It was like, whoa, a VCR, that's awesome, And so we would make these dumb movies and stuff. And then I started to get the idea that you could mix like drawing and making dumb like skits and stuff. So I started trying in high school, started trying to do animation, like made little short little films, and then ended up going to the School of Visual Arts for animation. So that was cool. And then it was lucky because I graduated in '94, which was also right in the middle of another animation boom like there is now, right? It was like,
yeah,
there's a lot of cartoons going on. It was lucky to jump right in to MTV on Beavis and Butthead and The Head and Daria and all these shows. And that's actually where we first met, when you were working on Deathmatch.
MTV Animation, yep.
Yep. I was so green, I didn't know how shit worked. And I guess now I get it more. I'm telling you this story. This is the first time I'm actually reflecting on this.
Yeah.
It's like, because I see this now as a guy who runs a studio. I think I was ID'd as a guy. It's like, that guy probably has a show in him, It's like he's doing a good job doing boards. I was doing some station IDs and stuff. So they gave me a blind development deal. They're like, develop some stuff, right? And did all this stuff. And then I had this one at the end. I kind of looked at the whole thing, and it was a lot of really weird stuff. And I'm like, what would MTV buy? And I had done this student film. There was kind of this natural dialogue.
At SVA?
At SVA, of like following these kind of like kids that lived in the Lower East Side and like animating their dialogue and stuff. So I was like, just took a frame of that film, had no idea what the show was. And I'm like, downtown, what do you do in New York when you're 15? This downtown answers that question. And then Abby Turcouli, the guy running it, he's like, that's the one I want to buy. And I'm like, fuck, I got to figure out what that is.
What's
and
the show?
I was like, we're just going to walk around. I thought we could make something like Slacker or something where it's like we're just going to record real dialogue of kids, come back, edit it together, and animate it. There won't be any regular characters. It'll just be people hanging out. And they're like, yeah, man, that's the show we're going to make. But then once it got into series, there was a new president of the network, and he was like, oh, you got to have scripts and hire actors and shit. So it's kind of like a hybrid of it, because a lot of the actors are people we met on the street when we were doing the interviews, so they were not professional actors. And a lot of the stories were like based on the stories that they told us, but we still had people write it. But that was a cool project. It was real weird. I was like, I had no idea that was like a fluke that somebody would buy a show like that, like especially back then.
So how did you came out of SVA and
Yeah.
you graduated with a degree in what? What do
I
you
guess
get
it's
out of
a
there?
Bachelor of Fine Arts.
And then you graduate and you walk out of school and then
Yeah.
you stand on the street and you look around and what do you?
Well, that was like a time when, like I said, it's happening now too. Animation was they needed people so bad that
So you
I got
call
the gig.
MTV?
I
Like,
got
do
the
you
gig.
knock on
They
the
called
door?
me. They knew I had a gig before I graduated because basically one of my classmates was interning at MTV, and I think she told them, they're like, hey, who at SVA, like, who could we hire? And I guess she gave them a bunch of names, and they called me and interviewed me, and they're like, when can you start? And I'm like, I graduate on Wednesday, and they're like, can you start on Thursday?
Is that what happened?
Yeah.
Wow.
Basically, so it's not, it's not the best story for like, this is how you do it.
Right,
It's
right.
like, I would say that's probably rare, but it's
I would
kind
say
of
it's
how
rare.
shit's happening again now
Is it?
because we're grabbing people straight out of school. Like, there's such a need for talent in animation
Yeah.
right now because there's so many cartoons being made. And I got to say specifically, if you're out there, animation fans, animation wannabe people who work in animation, like, get good at doing storyboards. That's the one that we need the most, man. It's super hard to find good storyboard people.
Why is that, do you think?
Well, you need to be good at a lot of things. It's like
Yeah.
a lot of different disciplines because, like, if you're purely an animator, you could dig into that craft, which is like the movement and the timing and the acting and stuff. Or if you're purely in design, it's about like, being like a really good drafts person and, making design decisions that are pleasing. Being a storyboard artist, you have to be kind of like a good storyteller, like kind of a good like cinematographer. You have to be like a good writer. You've got to be funny if you're working on a funny show. You also have to be good at drawing. You also have to be good at like posing and acting characters. It's like there's like 10 different skills you
Is there
have
a
to
stepping
have.
stone to becoming a good storyboard artist?
Yeah, that was the first gig I had actually at MTV, which is there's a gig called a Storyboard Revisionist, and that's like where you fix all the other boards. So I remember it was such an eye-opener for me because you idolize the storyboard artists, like that's what I want to do, and then you sit with the directors and they rip the board artists' work to shreds. They're like, don't do this, this sucks, and you're like, oh man, it looks pretty good to me.
You don't realize
But-
what the problem
Yeah, and then when you work as a revisionist, you really learn because you have to fix all the things, all the recurring problems, and some of them are specific to shows or specific to that director, but then some of them you realize are like these are the things that you always want to do, and these are the things you always don't.
So the
wanna do.
revisionist isn't identifying the problems. It's
No, the revisionist is just the fixer.
who
It's like
identifies the problems.
the director, generally the director, or maybe the showrunner, or creator. I mean, it depends on the scale of the show, right?
Right.
Like sometimes it's like you got a show and it's like there's many levels of bosses, and sometimes it's like, well, the creator is the showrunner and also the director, so then you're just dealing with one person. But sometimes there's like you're working on a big show, there's a lot of notes coming down the pipeline, from all different like a show like Big Mouth, right, that we do for Netflix. That's a pretty big show. There's like 4 creators, and there's a supervising director, and then there's episodic director. So you might be getting like six people's notes condensed down into whatever.
So tell me about the those early days when you were at Daria Beavis,
Yeah.
MTV,
Yeah.
in the 90s.
Yeah, man. It was a cool time. It was super, fucking America had so much money. The economy was doing well. MTV threw these crazy parties all the time. And it was when MTV was a thing too,
Right.
And they all these you remember they would throw these Christmas parties and these VMA parties, boat parties, and it was crazy. It was so that was I was like, this is what it's like to work, And then I remember moving out to LA and thinking in Hollywood there's going to be even crazier parties. Never as crazy as the MTV parties, and then the work itself too. I think. Beavis and Butt was already a hit. I came on in the fourth season, so I worked on season 4, 5, 6 in the movie. So I didn't work on seasons 1 through 3. So it was already, everybody knew it was, by then it was like a huge show. So, but I was working as a storyboard artist on that show, and I had no idea, and I can't even imagine this today, no idea what the schedule was. I felt no pressure to I would just work at my own pace and hand it in, and nobody ever told me when I had to get stuff done.
You think you were fast, or?
I think, probably, was fast enough, at least not. But I think it was more hey, that show was doing so well, and they couldn't, once it got out of boards, there were other stages to do. So it's if all the boards were stacked up, they wouldn't have enough. I don't even know. I don't know why was never aware of a schedule.
You weren't under any
Maybe
pressure.
I had the most amazing producer and production team that were pulling my strings as puppets without me realizing it, and it was great because I felt no pressure at all. Or maybe it was not at all organized in any way. I have no idea.
Either way, you're oblivious.
But the show got done and it was funny. That's the other thing back then. Working on that, I was like, oh man. This show's real funny and good, and it was easy to make the boards funny because the track was funny. And then you start working on other shows. When I moved out to LA, you realize not every fucking thing is geniusly written funny show, and you
feel pressure to improve
you got to work real hard to make it good. Sometimes when you're working on stuff, you're like, oh, this one's oof. I directed a couple pilots, and it was there's always something cool about them, but when my first couple gigs, and I'm like, we got to figure out how to make this work. This is not as funny as it needs to be to get picked up,
Why'd you move to LA?
Well, so here's what happened. I always thought I'd be actually one of the first real job out of college I had was working for Ralph Bakshi, kind of weirdo independent animation guy. And he hired me, and but then he skipped town. He shut down his shop, and I went back to MTV. I was going to work for MTV for 2 weeks as a storyboard revisionist, and then start on my job for Bakshi. And then I went in, and it was like a ghost town where, I pushed the door open in it, and there was papers, open windows, blowing papers on no furniture. I'm like, he's gone.
What?
Yeah, he's crazy dude, fun dude, but out of his mind. So I went back to MTV. And the point of that story is I thought I was going to be an independent, fuck the man, New York animator, Ralph Bakshi or Bill Plimpton or somebody, right? And then I started working at MTV, and became got in the system of doing cartoons and stuff. So LA didn't really occur to me initially. I thought I'm going to be independent, New York guy, but then as I started working on TV shows and stuff and developing stuff and sold a show and things like that, I'm like, this is cool. Maybe I want to do this. And then that downtown show only went for 1 season. Got a lot of critical acclaim and awards and shit, but it got canceled.
Did you get an Emmy for that?
We got nominated for a Primetime Emmy. I think it was MTV's only Primetime Emmy nomination for animation.
Wow.
Because at the time, Beavis and Butthead wasn't considered serious enough to get an Emmy,
That's crazy.
And it's weird.
Can you watch it anywhere? Is it available?
You can watch a bootleg. You may or may not be able to get a bootleg if you search it online. And what was my point? Oh yeah. So anyway, I hadn't thought about LA until so the downtown show gets canceled, right? And I convinced my wife, at the time she was my girlfriend, to quit her job because she was working in this she worked at a celebrity photo agency that represented all these like famous celebrity photographers like Mark Seliger and David LaChapelle and all these guys. And she hated it because that business is really, really brutal. And she would come to MTV and be like, man, it looks like you have fun. I'm like, we do. We're making cartoons. You should quit your job, do this. Because she went to school for painting and film. And I'm like, come in. She came and like worked as a color stylist. And then, so she quit her job and she just had like a couple little freelance jobs. And then I lost the show I was doing. And then we were living in this house in Williamsburg and the landlord came. He's like, hey, I'm selling my house. You got to get out by the end of the year. So we had 2 months left. We had to move out of our house and we had no jobs. So
no pressure.
I was like, fuck it, let's go. Oh, and then the thing that was really the thing is like you could go back to directing on Dario. And I thought for a second, I was like, man, I think I hit the ceiling of what I could do in New York. If I stay here, my show got canceled. They're not going to give me another one at MTV.
Why'd they cancel it if it was nominated for an Emmy?
That happened after they canceled it.
Gosh, that sucks.
But yeah, we went to. I remember going to the Emmys that year. It was I was hanging out with Seth MacFarlane and Family Guy had gotten canceled too, and we were both sitting there like, hey, both our shows got nominated for Emmys and they're both canceled. At the time,
yeah,
that was before you guys put on the reruns and gave it a new life.
Right.
And so anyway, yeah, when they were like, you could go back to direct on Dario, I was like, man, we should move to LA. Let's go out there and see what's up. So we didn't have any jobs lined up, but I figured just move out there, see what happens. And we figured it out pretty quick.
What'd you do? How'd you land?
One thing was like, the guy who was the producer on Beavis and Butthead had moved out there like a couple years previous. And he ended up at Klasky Csupo. He was the creative director of their commercials division. So he's like, hey, you want to get rep to direct commercials? So I started directing a lot of commercials. I directed a couple commercials for Budweiser.
Oh, you did?
It back to that, yeah. So that was a cool gig. And then I was doing stuff for the networks, like, directing or like supervising directing on stuff. And, I knew a lot of people, and also I gotta say I didn't plan this strategically, but it's a much better situation to when we actually got nominated for the Emmy for Downtown after I moved to LA because the show came out and it aired in '99 over 2000, and then I don't know when in the spring or something of it's around this time, right? So what is it? The summer they announced like the primetime Emmys, so. It got announced while I was in LA, like looking for jobs, and they're like, "Oh, you're a fucking Emmy-nominated primetime show creator. It's a good position to be in when you're looking for gigs."
Yeah,
Yeah. So it just worked out well for that. It was luck. Worked out lucky.
So what'd you do then?
So then,
did some ads.
Yeah, did a lot of commercials. And I was on the weirdo list. That's
what do you mean?
Klasky had a lot of their guys that they would have their roster, and it's like these are the guys that go out for like the cereal commercials or like the Keebler Elves or the whatever the safe stuff, and then there'd be like these are the guys that like if it needs to be a weird thing. So I remember it was me, a guy named Dave Foss, and a guy named Bill White were the three. Those were the guys. We were the three like weirdo bid guys. And the guy I worked with all the time there on this stuff was John Schnepp, who we ended up working together
of course.
A lot. He actually, when we first started Titmouse, before we even started doing what's it called series and stuff, he actually rented an edit room from us, and he would like hang out. He pretty much, not even pretty much, he would literally live there. He would like sleep there and edit and stuff, and it would be like that room, it was definitely Schnepp's room. Like you'd walk in and you'd get that Schnepp atmosphere as soon as you walked in. As soon as you walked in there. But that's when I really got to know him. Before we started working on Metalocalypse was on that stuff. And I had met him before that. I'd met him actually back at MTV. He had sent in this thing called Flack Crisp. Did you ever see that? It was this weird live action, but like composited with like crazy weird digital effects. Man, I don't know if this exists somewhere. We should really put that out. But it starred Nick Offerman before. Nick Offerman wasn't famous in any way at the time. And Nick Offerman was just this action hero running around like in outer space, like fighting weird like Schnepp creatures and stuff. It was bizarre.
Yeah.
I mean, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's yeah, I don't know if your audience, how familiar they are with John Schnepp, but he passed away a year ago yesterday. It's crazy. He was a good friend and an excellent super weirdo.
I was with you here at Comic-Con last year.
Yeah.
And I think your phone buzzed.
Yeah.
When we were talking.
Oh man.
And it lit up.
Yeah, that was rough. He's he's singular human being.
He cut some Space Ghost stuff for us out in L.A.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
We had a black leather couch that he stayed on when he cut it.
Yeah, yeah.
Because he didn't drive,
yeah,
right?
Yeah, that's
so
right.
So he'd take the bus across town.
That's right.
Santa Monica, come in, work on Space Ghost all night, all day.
That's right. That's
sleep
right.
on that couch.
That's right.
And then eventually go home just whenever he was knew when he was done.
Yeah, he was. And for those of you who aren't familiar with Schnepp's like physical appearance,
John Schnepp,
he was a really tall dude. So
very tall, crazy
when I would
hair.
drive, and he had that crazy hair that stuck up high on his head, and I would drive him around a lot because he didn't drive. You know, he grew up in New York and then moved to Chicago at like driving age, and he never learned to drive. So, but then he lived in L.A. for like 25 years.
Hard to live in L.A.
learning to drive. Actually, he did learn to drive.
He did?
Like 2 years ago, but then he never drove. Like he got a license. At least he's like, at least now I can drive.
He had to, yeah.
But when I would drive him around, because of his height and his height of his hair, he would get a car head. You know how people get hat head? Because his head would actually touch the top of the car and flatten out his hair from the roof of the car. So, yeah.
That's funny, man.
But yeah, man. Real good dude.
Tragic loss.
Yeah, man. And I had this thing happen. So I was staying in Austin, Texas the week after he passed last year, right? We have a place outside of Austin, and we bought it from these hippies, right, who had all these like new agey, like kind of like energy circles around it. They have a labyrinth that you could walk, and there was this cool, and it was cool, right? Like I'm not a ghosty guy, but I was like about to go to sleep, and I was in that state where you're not quite asleep, you're just like about to fall asleep, and the family had already gone to sleep, and I was kind of hanging out on the couch and looking out the window at one of those energy circles. And then at the energy circle, it looked like some 80s special effect. This is a true story, at least, you know, whatever. I don't know how this came about, but it looked like one of those like Jedi ghosts, you know, a blue transparent or translucent version of John Schnepp appeared in the energy circle and floated over to me, right? And he looks at me and he says, "Repeat after me. Scrimble, jamble, cleamble, gooms, gwimble, jamble, gloom," right? And I repeat it exactly, and then he's like, "Nope." And then he says another nonsense phrase, right? And then I repeat it exactly, and he's like, "Nope." And then that happens like 8 or 9 times where he keeps asking me to repeat this nonsense phrase, and every time I repeat it exactly, and he says, "Nope." And then the last time he did it, I decided I'm going to say a totally different nonsense phrase. And then when I did that, he like folded his arms and went like, and like nodded his head and floated away backwards. So that was like my last interaction with maybe Schnepp's ghost. Who can know, right? Either it's like my subconscious mind like working out something in my brain as I'm about to fall asleep, or it was his ghost.
After it happened, did you go to sleep?
I did. Yeah, I did go to sleep, but I was freaked out for a while.
The next day you wake up and you're...
Yeah, I was like, oh, that was weird.
Schnepp.
Yeah, and I told Shannon, and then actually told that story at his memorial service, too. Yeah, it was, a crazy experience. Yeah.
Wow.
I couldn't believe it. Yeah.
You believe in ghosts now?
Maybe. Who can know? I'm
Sounds
working.
like you do.
Yeah. I like ghosts. That's cool, man.
What was Metalocalypse like?
Oh man,
Talk about that show.
That was so fun. That was that was a weird coming together of things. Oh, I'm going to do a sidebar to the present and then go back to the past. So whenever we do panels at these conventions, right, we always get the same questions over and over again.
What do they ask?
Well, one of them, I'm sure you get this one too. Why does it take so long between seasons of Venture Brothers?
Yeah.
Right? That's not what I'm going to talk about.
Uh-huh.
How do I
When's
get
Rick
a
and Morty
job?
coming back?
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, the one that I get all the time is like, hey, are they ever going to bring Metalocalypse back?
Yeah.
Right? And it's always been no. Like, that's not going to happen. After it was over, obviously, after Doomstar, I'm like, it's not happening. You know, I know you guys want it. You can fax as many things in. You can hold as many protests in front of Hulu as you want.
Right.
It's not happening. But now, with the Adult Swim Fest, Brendan's performing, Death Clock's performing, and we're making new music videos for it. So
about that?
Maybe you can't get a new TV show series, but you can see, if you go to Adult Swim Fest, you'll get to see some cartoon Metalocalypse stuff that you have never seen before.
November
So
15th
that's
and
cool.
16th.
Yeah,
in
there
LA.
you go. But anyway, so
Are you doing? So you're doing animation for the festival?
yeah, we are.
So you're doing Metalocalypse animation now?
Yeah, isn't that fucking crazy?
That's crazy.
Yeah. So that brings me back to like the beginning of that project, which is really weird. So I knew Brendan Small, Tommy Blotcher, the two creators, separately from working on them with different projects, and I knew Schnepp obviously really well. And Brendan, I was working on a project with him for Sci-Fi Channel that never went anywhere, but we were already working together. Tommy, I knew from around. He had been in like writers' rooms and edit sessions, and I'm like, that's like the funniest fucking guy. And also, I like metal, and that's pretty much. I was from New Jersey, it's like metal and hip hop. That's what you listen to when you're from New Jersey.
Who do you like?
I like who I loved. My first concert that I went to when I was 14 was King Diamond. King Diamond and Merciful Fate. And I remember I asked my mom, because it was in Philadelphia, right? I was like, I want to go see King Diamond. She was like, no, I'm not. That's devil music. I'm not taking you. You're not allowed, right? So this is the perfect, 14-year-old in 1986 story is like, we boosted my friend's dad's car. None of us had driver's licenses, and drove to Philly and went to see the concert, because there was enough time that my mom forgot the night, and she didn't know, so we just
it wasn't on her radar.
Yeah,
King Diamond was playing
exactly.
In
So we drove the car, and my one friend was having a party that night when his parents were out of town. So I told my mom I was going to his house, right? And I was like, because before cell phones, when my mom calls the first time, because I knew I was going to be late and get in trouble, but I needed to buy some time. I was like, the first time she calls, ask him where I am, tell her I'm in the bathroom. And the second time, tell her I just left and I'm on my way home. But she didn't know he was having a party, so I knew he could answer the phone. So then when I did eventually, when I was finished with my Devil Music concert, which I absolutely loved seeing, by the way, I remember came back, I was all hoarse, kind of like I am now from fucking screaming all night last night. And she was like, are you drunk? And I wasn't drunk, but I figured that's the lesser thing to take. I'm like, yeah, I'm drunk. And she was like, what were you doing? And I was like,
drinking.
Yeah, there's this kid who was like the bad kid or the bad influence kid. And then my mom knew this guy. If you're listening, he'll probably never hear this, but at the time I was hanging out with this guy, Craig Wheelock, who was a skater kid or whatever. And I mean, he was great. He was a cool dude, nice guy. But I guess my mom, for some reason, thought he was a bad influence. So I was like, I'll just tell her. I was like, I was getting drunk with Craig Wheelock. And she was like, all right, you're grounded. But I was like, man, that's a so much better situation than I fucking stole a car and drove to Philadelphia and saw the Devil Music. So, metal. But anyway, so when we first started making Metalocalypse, it was so fun because the studio, it was our first series. We had been doing a lot of short form stuff, pilots, and all different weirdo shit. But just trying to figure out that show was so fun. And
this was your first series.
First series that we produced it inside at Titmouse. Yeah, so I'd worked on a bunch of series and created series and ran series and stuff, and had done stuff for Cartoon Network like Megas and things. But this is the first one we were doing it internally, and it was great. It's it was such a weird process because it wasn't like, Adult Swim's so freeing. They weren't like, who are you hiring? It was like we brought on whoever we want. We kind of did whatever we want. Also, Brendan was pretty brazen back then, and wouldn't, just ignored our point executive Nick, just wouldn't respond to him or do any notes that he gave, to the point where Nick would just give up. So at the time, it's like, because Brendan just had he already had a relationship with Lazo from Home Movies, so he's like, why do I have to deal with this new guy?
Right. Right.
So I think that, whatever, politically, who knows if that's the best way to deal with a TV network, but it worked out great for
show.
Brendan. Yeah. So and like we brought in this guy Antonio Canobio to be the art director, who's a guy I've known forever, and like I'm like, he's gonna kick ass, and nobody asked even to see his work. I'm like, he's just gonna he's gonna make it look awesome.
You just brought him in.
Yeah, exactly, and he did make it look awesome.
So there's artists who execute, and there's also artists who bring in their own.
Yeah, you want
approach.
ones with big brains, with like that think about shit and bring ideas. I mean, there's a place for everybody. There's a place for straight like executors too, but yeah, he really influenced the vibe of that show considerably, I think. And yeah, it was very loose. That show, there were scripts, but when Brendan and Tommy would go in the booth, a lot of times they'd improv so much that they'd find a new story in the booth, and then we'd follow that path, and then it becomes a totally different episode. And just that was the other thing that was great working with Adult Swim, because it's not like, if you did that with another network, it'd be tough because you'd need to get approval. Like, you'd be like, hey, this is the script we approved. How come your animatic is a totally different story that has nothing to do with that, But it was great where it's like, well, I think we probably would have got those notes if it wasn't funny. But they were really funny. So then it's
Can't
like,
argue
okay,
with it.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you do a lot of animation for the performances, I guess, like you're doing now?
You know what the secret is? The secret technology
What?
that we use for that, right? Because it's like this thing, these metal bands, it's real, like fast drumming and like, that double bass and single frame edits. A lot of single frame edits in these things, like really fast cutting. And if that shit's off by just a little bit, it ruins there's a disconnect, right, from what the band's playing and what you're seeing on screen. So we're trying to think, it's like, how do we sync this up to the band?
How do you sync that up? Yeah.
All it is the drummer, Gene Hoagland, who's like just a really, really good metal drummer. There's just a click track that goes into his ear that's like synced with the actual footage. So he just plays to the click track.
He's playing to the cartoon.
Yeah, he's playing to the click track of the cartoon. Yeah, yeah. So that's how the band, and it works perfectly.
Did you try and do it the other way first?
No, that was the first thing we tried, and it worked. So we're like, let's not try another way.
Wow, so he's actually playing to the animation.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Single frame edits, and is that the what's the test that they run?
Oh, the Harding test.
Harding test.
Well, the first bunch of seasons, that wasn't a concern.
Will you explain the Harding test?
Oh, yeah. So the Harding test is this thing for it's like a test for. I know it's for epilepsy. It might also cover other things, but it's basically a very expensive piece of software that will diagnose whether your episode has any kind of visuals in it that might trigger an epileptic episode.
Right.
Whether it be strobing effects or fast cuts, or sometimes it's like
single frame edits, flashing lights.
Yeah, exactly. Diagonal or horizontal lines, like panning by too quickly, high contrast.
So if you show that on
black
TV,
to white. Yeah, so that's what it's for, right?
People can be triggered, and that happened, right? Was it Pokemon?
Pokemon is what started it, right? But that I don't know this guy Harding.
Yeah.
Right. All the networks use it now.
You think it's bullshit?
Here's what I've heard.
The
guy who invented the spec of what it does, and the guy who makes the software, the guy who said this is what you need is the guy who also makes all the money on it. So it's like it's a one dude, like, singular ecosystem. I get if you're a network, right? You want to have your liability sorted out, right? So if somebody does, have a seizure or have something bad happen and they sue you as a network, you'd be like, well, we did our due diligence. We used this test that's supposed to be the thing.
Yeah.
Right. And so maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. Who can know? I guess so far so good. I don't think it can hurt, right? It can't hurt.
Bullshit on it though.
Maybe. I don't know.
That's interesting. But
I mean, it's a good thing. It's a good thing
Sure.
to not cause people to have epileptic
real.
seizures. Yeah. So I guess if there's a chance that it's helping, it's a good thing, right?
But did that affect the animation and the live performances? Or did it not apply to that?
It didn't apply to the concert because I think concerts already have a bunch of flashing
Right,
lights and stuff.
yeah.
But TV, it did. We had to tone down the opening. We had to take in later seasons, like take frames out of the opening of Metalocalypse.
Did you get other crazy notes for standards and practices?
We mostly get them on the kid shows. For Metalocalypse,
Yeah.
crazy notes, man. It not so much because, again, like Adult Swim lets you get away with a lot. I mean, actually, the main thing was the main one for Metalocalypse is there's a character, Dr. Roxo, who loves to do cocaine.
Loves cocaine.
And although he could talk about doing cocaine all the time, you could show piles of cocaine all around him. You could show him holding cocaine. You could show cocaine around the rims of his nostrils, but you could never show him actually doing cocaine.
Huh.
You could never show him snorting cocaine.
Yeah.
Which, is kind of silly because there's no question that he's continuously doing
connect the
cocaine
dots.
the whole time. But that was like an S&P, like you can't show the actual act
Interesting.
of... and then the other thing that happened across all our shows, and I'm assuming all shows across Adult Swim, later on, like this happened maybe, like 5 years ago when this might be something you have to cut too.
Let's hear it.
When the truth guys bought a big block of advertising on Adult Swim, the Truth anti-smoking campaign. We got the note like you got to cut smoking out of all, like any new shows, can't have people smoking. So, and Super Jail was a big, like everybody smoked, all the characters smoked in Super Jail. So Christie was real smart. He's like, hey, I get it, Truth campaign pays the bills. That's what allows our cartoons to exist. But can we do one last smoking episode where there's one cigarette left in the jail and they have a gigantic fight over the last cigarette? And we did that episode. And that was like, and then after that, there was no more smoking in Super Jail.
On the network.
Yeah, and on the
That
network.
was the last incidence of smoking on the network.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so you're not going to see people smoking in Adult Swim cartoons since whenever that was.
That's funny.
2014 or
I didn't know that.
That was. Yeah.
So you've expanded. Titmouse has expanded tremendously.
We keep expanding. It's
Yeah.
crazy. Yeah, the L.A., we've got a few offices, New York and Vancouver.
Yeah.
So we make cartoons all over the place.
Why do you do that? Why do you need different offices?
Well, the New York one was all about Adult Swim because basically, Chris McCulloch and Christy Krakis are two guys I've known forever. Actually, Christy worked on Daria when I was working on Daria and at MTV, and he lived on my same street in Williamsburg. We lived one block away from each other, so I'd see him on the train all the time. We'd party, we'd hang out in New York when we were at MTV. He kept in touch when he was in that band Cheeseburger. When he swung through town, we'd hang out and stuff. And then we didn't do the first season of Super Jail. That was done at Augenblick. Who's a friend too. They're a great studio. But he then got a gig. He got like a Comedy Central show that had a bigger budget, and he turned down season 2 of Super Jail. And Christy was like, "I need a place to do my show. Aaron's not going to do it." And Aaron had good reasons. He was like, it's funny. I called him. I was like, "Why are you turning this down, man? Is there something I got to look out for?" He's like, "Man, I don't want to be you. I only want to do one show at a time and make it good, not be like making like 5-10 shows at the same time." So I was like, "All right, that's cool." He's like, "Plus this Comedy Central show has a lot bigger budget. We're gonna be able to, run my studio better." So anyway, the point of it is Super Jail didn't have a studio, and Christy was like, "Hey, can you take over Super Jail at Titmouse? But I don't want to move to LA." And then at the similar time, Chris McCulloch. They parted ways with the studio that was doing Venture Brothers. He's like, "I need a place to do Venture Brothers, and I don't want to move to L.A." So both Christie and McCulloch, it was a weird thing. They went out with Ali in New York, and conspired on a plan to convince me to open up a studio in New York. And they called me afterwards, and they're like, would you open a studio in New York? And I went out there, kind of scouted it out with Antonio Canobio, the guy I was telling you before, and we're like, I think we could do it. And since I was from New York, it didn't freak me out. I had already worked there and knew everybody. So I ended up, Lazo called me, and he's like, hey, so what's up with this New York studio? And I'm like, well, I'll open it. You need a place, and this is the best thing. This is, and that's a guy that Lazo, he's an interesting character, like all of us. But if he says like I think he's really fair and really, you can really believe things. If he declares something to you to support you as an artist, he basically said there's only insurance I needed to open a studio, which was, if you open a studio in New York, I'll support you with work. And I was like, all right, I believe you. And then he did. So it worked out well. And that's why we opened the New York studio.
Fantastic.
Yeah, because he's like, I got a bunch of creators in New York that need stuff all the time. So it's like, it's, PFFR can't make everything in New York.
Right. And how about Vancouver?
Yeah. And Vancouver was a similar thing, right? Where basically it was like opportunity based, where we were doing this show Motor City for Disney, and it was hard to find. We needed like really, really strong 2D animators, and that culture in LA had kind of been whittled away because they ship shows overseas most of the time, and we had animators in house, but even in our shop we couldn't find enough to do like the really high quality 2D animation, not just like the puppeted animation. So we started freelancing, and we were freelancing to like a group of maybe 15 or 20 animators in Canada. And Ben Kalina, who's like more of our business guy, right? He was like, if we opened a studio in Vancouver, we could get tax credits on these guys, and it would be a lot cheaper. We could like actually have better production value. So we were looking at opening the studio in Vancouver, and then one of our animators sold a show to Nickelodeon, right? And he told Nickelodeon that he wanted it to be animated at Titmouse, and they were like, Nickelodeon's like, we can't afford to animate this in LA. And they were right. Nickelodeon's like, yeah, we can't. Like, it would be too expensive to do it in LA. But I was like, hey man, we're opening this shop in Vancouver, and we just like really pushed down. We put the gas pedal to the floor. We opened that studio, got it like up and running from like 0 to like 35 people in it in like a month. It's like we're like, all right, we're doing it, and that one's real big now. There's like 300 employees in Vancouver.
How many employees at Titmouse now?
There's 750 employees, man. Wow. Isn't that bananas?
How's that feel from going from day one to this?
Man, it's weird. It's like, I like it. It's cool. I mean, I love that we're making all these cartoons and stuff, but I do kind of miss like when you have less than 100 employees, you can know everybody.
Yeah.
Like every single person, you can know their name, you can know their personality. Those days are gone. I can't keep track of 750 people. I'm lucky if I know their faces. I know, it's bonkers, right? Well, like I'm saying, it's a good time to be an independent because we're working for everybody. I think we're in production on 13 series right now. So it's like, and it's for it's for pretty much everybody. And then pilots and stuff too, even like other weirdos who are trying to get into animation who've never done it before. Like there's like, I feel like everybody's trying to do an animated series now. You're
the gold standard.
Well, thank you, man.
How do you find people to work for you? You said you pull them right out of school.
Sometimes, the best way I find, if you can get it, is referrals, right? Because somebody can have a really kick-ass portfolio or a really good reel, but you don't know what they're like to work with. Like, you don't know their speed. You don't know their professionalism. Like, if they're an asshole, So if somebody can vouch for somebody, if you have somebody who's worked with that person, or if it's a student, like a lot of times they'll pull the coattails of the other students. They're like, hey man, you looking for guys? This guy was my roommate. He's also real good. Or, this was my girlfriend. She's a better animator than me, or whatever. That's usually how you find people. Or even some of the teachers will hip us. They're like, this is the one you got to look out for. And they'll like slip us the thing, ahead of time. So, but I think that's an important thing for students. Like this art school, man, it's expensive. it's kind of a racket, right? Because you could learn art. You could get skillful at art and spend way less money and not have all this like crazy student debt. But the best thing about these art schools is you get connected through them because the teachers are usually connected with people, the alumni is usually gone on to do other stuff, and the other students that you come up with are going to get jobs and they're going to recommend you and stuff. So part of it is like, you know, developing your skill as an artist, but the bigger part about going to these schools is it's just, you know, making sure that you meet a lot of people and are around a lot of people that you're going to be working with for the rest of your career. That's the thing. I taught 1 year at this. I went to the School of Visual Arts in New York, and I taught there for only one semester because I ended up moving to LA. But that was like my opening speech. I was like, if you came here and your sole purpose is just to get a job in animation, you should drop out today. Like, save yourself a bunch of money, go get an internship somewhere, like, you know, take cheaper art classes. But if you want to develop your style, develop as an artist, get to work on your own films, be around a bunch of like-minded people, then that's the reason to be here. Because you could waste this in 4 years if you don't play it right. You could waste all your money because you're not gonna. This diploma does not guarantee you a job. You know, it's like, it's meaningless in this industry. So if you're paying all this money, make sure you use it. Make sure you meet all these people. Make sure you actually, you don't try to get grades. You try to just do cool work and stuff. I don't know if anybody, like, they looked at me like blank. You know, they're right out of high school. They don't know what I'm talking about. They're like,
sounds like good advice.
What the fuck is this guy talking about?
You would know.
You know,
you would know.
Yeah.
Do you still draw?
I do, but
do you
not
work on
as
these
often.
shows? Do you?
Man, it's harder and
Do you
harder.
miss that?
I'm mostly a guy that goes to meetings now, and when I do draw, it's usually at the opposite sides of the. It's like the very extreme bread on a very tall sandwich, right? So I'm only at the very beginning or the very end, where it's like I'll like draw something on a Post-it note and be like, it should be like this, and it's like a vague, like almost not even a drawing, like the most like base level of a thing. Or it's like tweaking something at the very end, like in a After Effects or an edit of, like, you know, just like dialing it in and putting a little extra like sheen on stuff.
Yeah.
I'm very rarely doing stuff in the middle of the process these days. Every once in a while I'll do drawings, or sometimes for the promotional stuff or dumb stuff, like I'm doing the next T-shirt for our next Smash party. So it's like stuff like that. That's fun.
Tell us about your Smash party.
Oh, so that's a thing that we started in New Jersey back for fun, where we would just take things like TVs and like porcelain vases and electronics and just smash them with sledgehammers and stuff, and it was just tons of fun. And then we moved out to LA, started Titmouse. We started doing it at Titmouse. It kind of became our company party, and now it's gotten huge. We build this big cage in the parking lot, and we have bands play and food trucks, and it's almost like this thing. Like the last couple of years, over 2,000 people have come to the Smash Party. Wow. It's a real crazy party. But we have we've gotten like real legit with it now. We have people sign releases, and you get a wristband. You can't go in. We have 4 people attending the cage. There's one called the Ringmaster, right? The Ringmaster is kind of like the shot caller who is like the hype man and kind of like announces the people and gets them all riled up. And then there's the referee. The referee just looks for anybody doing anything safe and has a whistle and blows a whistle if anybody tries to do something crazy. And then we have 2 professional medics, like actual medics we hire from like EMT place. And the reason we have 2 is so in case somebody actually has to be like fixing somebody up and a second person gets hurt, then they can fix the second person up, because we had that happen in the past too, where
what
it's
happened?
Like, well, it's not usually that bad. It's
Glass
usually
flying?
like cuts and stuff like that. Oh, in the cage it's all these layers, like it's like we have like plastic around the bottom, and then it's a chain link fence, but we put this like fine mesh screen around it, so even like little tiny bits of glass and stuff can't get through the cage. And one year I remember, you learn a little bit every year. Like one year somebody threw an axe at a TV, and it bounced off the TV, and then that's before we had a ceiling on the cage, and it was spinning around, and everybody was looking at it like, holy shit, that axe might come out into us, and luckily it didn't. It fell back in, but I was like, remember looking to the side of the person sitting next to me, he was like, we need to get a ceiling on this thing next year. Like, that's not a good sign. And we, like, over the years just learned things. It's like, we don't allow people to smash, like, food, like, no watermelons like Gallagher because it gets too slippery in there. And we don't allow fire because, for obvious reasons, like, a lot of times people would light shit on fire, and I'm like, that's just getting it's a little too dangerous. It's dangerous. This thing is dangerous enough.
It's too dangerous.
We don't need people getting lit on fire, you know. And we did have one guy that had to go to the emergency room one year. He had to get 6 stitches in his hand, but that's the worst injury we've had. So far pretty good. And that guy was even wearing learning about things like that's the year, like he had like heavy leather workman's gloves on, right? Because we have everybody's got to wear safety goggles, and they have to have, you know, long pants, no open-toed shoes, and we have other safety gear. You can get as safe as you want. You can have every inch of your body covered if you want, helmets, all this shit. But we have like a base minimum. And even that year, I was like, because he had a sledgehammer. You know, when you swing a sledgehammer, you're supposed to slide your one hand to the bottom and use it as like a lever. But he kept his hand at the top near the metal part, and he smashed through a TV screen. And when he pulled his hand out, like a piece of glass cut his hand. And I'm like, man, even with heavy leather gloves. So we researched it, and we got snake handler gloves, and that's what we use now because they can survive. Like, you can have a fucking like cobra bite it, and it won't be able to penetrate it. So those snake handler gloves are what we use now. So it's like even like a cobra biting down on it with full force can't penetrate this thing. So far those have been good for keeping people from getting cut. But yeah, we learn a lot on that. And then we made a VR game called Smash Party VR, where you can be in VR and it's like you're at the Smash Party, but you're in VR.
We should broadcast.
It's real dumb. Oh yeah, you should have people play it, man. It's real dumb.
Yeah,
you would like it.
Yeah. All right. Chris Prynoski.
Woo!
The gold standard, the standard bearer for American animation.
We did a
animation.
Podcast.
Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for inviting me.
Music from this episode is a song called Bochicha from the album Sun-Bronze Greek Gods by Dom. Be sure to visit adultswim.com/podcast for links to some of the things Chris and I were just talking about, and we'd love to hear from you. adultswimpodcast@gmail.com. Send us your requests, comments, criticisms, whatever. Thanks to Dave Bonowitz for editing this, Christina Loringer for her help, and thanks to you for listening.